Good morning. During this session, we're going to talk about counseling using the doctrinal reference of ATP 6-22.1, the counseling process. Go ahead and set up some bookmarks here. All right, so why is counseling important? Well, effective counseling helps achieve desired goals and effects, manage expectations, and improve the organization. And I would say that counseling improves not just soldiers, but leaders as well. One of the most important aspects of counseling is expectation management. Soldiers need to understand what is expected of them, and counseling is one of the easiest ways to communicate what standards are expected. Some things that come out of counseling or that should be a part of counseling is genuine interest in your subordinates. Our most valuable resource is time, and counseling is a way of investing time in your subordinates. Help soldiers understand what their role is in accomplishing the unit's mission. Acknowledging and reinforcing exceptional work or dedication. Evaluate subordinates' potential for development, and this becomes even more important as soldiers become non-commissioned officers. Providing subordinates with assistance or resources to address issues or further strengths, and we'll talk about this later on, but leaders a lot of times don't have a background in particular crisis issues. A lot of times leaders are young themselves and are going through things themselves, so there's nothing wrong with referring a soldier to get the assistance that they need. That's one of our primary functions as leaders. Empowering subordinates to identify and solve issues on their own, and I would agree with this. You identify problems that they have and give them some feedback and some resources to think about, and that really contributes to resiliency as soldiers develop and become leaders themselves. And then these last two, looking at issues before they can become significant for a soldier, and we cannot underestimate the power that problems and issues have in soldiers' lives, their behaviors, and ultimately their performance. I know me personally, if I've got stuff going on in my personal life, I'm not necessarily thinking about work. The three major categories of counseling, and you'll see these right at the beginning of the 4856, and we'll go a little bit more in depth in those. So an event-oriented counseling, like the title implies, involves a specific event or situation. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions about counseling and event counseling in general is what's known as negative counseling. And you can read this thing, and you're not going to find a negative counseling example. These are the specific instances that an event counseling gets after, and it's not that's not an exhaustive list, but it covers quite a bit. A couple of important ones here: reception and integration counseling. Absolutely critical that every new soldier that comes in gets some form of counseling. We'll call it initial counseling, but going back to that first page where we're talking about expectations, this is where leaders communicate those organizational expectations. Right place, right time, right uniform. Make sure your face is shaved in the morning before PT. You're doing hygiene. You're keeping your room clean. I mean, the list goes on and on. And then, kind of like I said earlier, soldiers are going to have problems. Issues are going to come up, and crisis counseling is important to sit down, not just to record the event on paper, but to just hear what's going on with the soldier, and how they're doing with it. Crisis counseling often should occur during periods of transition, And, you have different types of transition, and we'll talk about that in a different video, but, unexpected transitions, such as, death of a loved one or a family member, divorce, a significant financial, event that happens that just kind of wipes someone out. Those transition events should be recorded in a counseling session, and then you can identify if they need a referral for any of those things that happen. So your soldiers are going to experience deaths in the family, and those things are going to happen. So knowing the chaplain's phone number, their office, their email address, things like that, those are important to know as a leader. So kind of going at the event-oriented counseling, specific instances of superior or substandard performance. I think this is pretty important here. Every time a soldier fails to meet the standard, they should be counseled. So don't let those things slide. And we often do this very informally. We'll call them out on it. We'll say it. But this is important to do so that you can take a comprehensive look at a soldier, over a period of 30 days for monthly or a period of months, and it really helps to paint the picture of how the soldiers do it overall. One of the key points of any counseling session is actively listening, and really the subordinate should be speaking more than the counselor, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. And be prepared to conduct personal counseling. It may be related to an unresolved personal issue, or their performance may be related to an unresolved personal issue. I know me personally, if I'm having some, personal issues, I'm not necessarily thinking about work or the Army, or, I'm kind of focused on that event that's going on with me. And we talked briefly about how important it is to do an initial counseling on someone who comes in. These are some of the reasons why, familiarizes them with organizational standards, who their leaders are, chain of command, especially knowing that most commanders have open door policies, just knowing who they are, where their office is located, and then obviously familiarizing them with the NCO support channel. Because let's face it, not every leader is adept at dealing with soldier issues. So sometimes they need to move up the chain, so to speak. Key leader contact information, different opportunities for soldiers, a soldier of the month, quarter, education, training opportunities. This stuff's pretty self-explanatory. I got one of those when I'm processed here. Stay away from these particular areas, because again, soldiers don't know what they don't know. And just some other on and off post education opportunities. We talked briefly about crisis counseling, and one of the things that crisis counseling gets after is what are their immediate short-term needs. You have a lot of soldiers being displaced due to housing issues, so are they going to need cookware or furniture or whatever the case might be, especially after like a natural disaster or something like that. We talked about this shock after receiving negative news, and this stuff is going to happen. So leaders need to be prepared for these events. External agency support. You've got AER, MFLAC, chaplains, lots of different things that are available to soldiers going through periods of crisis. And then the appropriate referral, It's going to be beyond the capability or expertise of a subordinate leader. Soldiers not being recommended for promotion, they need to be counseled. They need to be told, hey, you failed to meet these particular standards. We are not going to recommend you for promotion at this time. And kind of the last transition or the last event-oriented counseling we'll talk about is transition counseling. People that get out in the Army, they also should be counseled. We kind of look at it as well. They're moving on to bigger and better things, but leaders have a responsibility to sit down with them and talk through some of these things: employment, education. So, your event-oriented counseling is certainly going to be one of the types of counseling that you do regularly. But the most routine counseling that you're going to do is performance counseling. And performance counseling is the review of a subordinate's duty performance during a specified period. Usually this happens monthly with soldiers after a training cycle or whatever else you have going on, and it captures kind of a summary of everything that they did. You want to provide specific examples during the counseling, and again, it goes back to communicating standards, and it's an opportunity for leaders to establish and clarify what is expected. So an example of this would be, you've got a saw gunner who's having multiple weapons malfunctions during squad live fires, having difficulty manipulating the laser, clearing malfunctions, at night under nods, and you can talk about that during the performance counseling and say, hey, that saw was whooping your butt during the live fires. Definitely think you need to do some more individual training, familiarization with the weapon system, and that way, under stress, under limited visibility, you can operate the weapon system effectively. And that doesn't have to be a negative exchange. You're simply identifying something that they weren't that great at, and letting them know that, and so they'll focus on that for that following month. So the last type of counseling that we'll talk about is professional growth counseling. This includes planning for accomplishment of individual and professional goals. So, kind of look at it as goal setting for subordinates. These counselings are going to come up as soldiers get closer to promotion and or schooling, training, future assignments, and looking at re-enlistment, talking through those things with your soldiers. So we talked about the types of counseling, and here in the next video we're going to talk about the counselor themselves and what those qualities are.